So in this video, and for the first time on this channel, I'll be taking a detailed look at one of Darren Nicholls' earliest police interviews. Now, it was Darren Nicholls' evidence at the Old Bailey in 1998 which ultimately convicted his former friends Michael Steele and Jack Wombs of the murders of Pat Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe, also known as the Essex Boys. This particular police interview provides detailed insight into the relationship between Pat Tate and Sarah Saunders, the fallout between Pat Tate and Michael Steele, plus a play-by-play account of what took place on the night of the murders, the night that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were killed. Take a listen to the following. So just before the tape finished, we began to speak about the relationship that Pat Tate had with his ex-girlfriend Sarah, and their relationship that Sarah had with Michael Steele and his girlfriend Jackie. So would you like to pick up the story again from there? Yeah, so Pat had since been, obviously I missed out that Pat had obviously been re-released from prison totally, and he'd had no further charges offered, which worried Mick anyway, because they'd always said that Pat was a grass, and he'd been grassing people up, etc. And Pat had split up with Sarah, his girlfriend or wife, I'm not sure which. Did you know her other name? No, I didn't, but if you said it, I might know it, but I don't. No, but it's what you... Just Sarah. Right, okay. And she had a little boy called... I can't even recollect what the little boy's name was, to be honest. I did actually go to her house she moved to when Pat chucked her out. It had to be done in secret because Pat wasn't to know where she lived, because when I was released from prison last time, I went on a training course to repair air conditioning and fridges. And she had a broken fridge and Mick said, could I have a look at it? She's just moving house and hasn't got a fridge. And I said, yeah, no problem. And that was the only... So I went round... So where was this? It was somewhere in Basildon. Langdon, not Basildon. This was a house, was it? This is a rented house that she had rented, and I didn't know the address. I wouldn't be able to take you back there or anything like that. It was dead in the middle of an estate sort of thing. And the fridge didn't work. He said, well, come and have a look at the fridge, he said. If not, we're going to buy her another one. This is Mick saying that he'll buy Sarah sort her out another fridge. And sorry, I'm sidetracking a bit here, but when I got out of prison, they gave me a grant to do refrigeration. And I bought a lot of fridges. I used to sell them as well in between jobs. That was my other little job to try and earn some more money. And so I went there, and believe it or not, it was... She'd plugged it in where the cooker goes. And then when she turned the cooker switch off, because the way it had been wired was funny, the cooker was wired into the cooker switch, but so was the socket near the floor. And she had plugged the fridge into the cooker socket and turned the cooker off, and the fridge went off as well. It was so stupid. It was ridiculous. So I stayed round there about an hour, and a couple of her relatives came round, and there was a bit of a Pat slagging session, you know, what he's done, he's got a girlfriend, she's living in their old house, all that old sort of stuff. I was just sitting there like, thinking, oh, hurry up, I just want to go home, because my wife hated me being associated with these people, and, you know, I promised her I wouldn't be associated with them, but like, well, you know, let me finish the job, because I just started this and that, and so I wanted to get away from them. They were quite happy to sit there and talk children. Can you say who was there? Oh, me, myself, Mick Steele, his girlfriend or wife Jackie, I don't know which, Sarah, her little baby boy, I don't know, Bradley, I don't know, some little git's name, right, little shitbag of a kid. And there was two other people that turned up, and I think it was Sarah's best friend and her husband, something like that. I'm not sure. They did say, oh, hello, I'm whatever, and do you know what she looked like, briefly? Quite a large girl with black hair, with a bloke that was the other way round, like dead slim. And they were both just friendly. There was no, you know, they were all just sitting there chatting. And then there was this all to do with, you know, what Pat had done the other day. And it was Pat didn't want to split up with Sarah, but Sarah wanted to split up with Pat. Since he got out, he was like, according to her, he was like controlling prostitutes, taking coke and just generally being a right lout, like, you know, had loads of fights, all sorts of stuff. She and him had split up, and he had sort of given her a hiding, chucked her out and said, fuck off, you can't live here without me. Anyway, like, we were in the house where I think Mick had that sort of helped her out a bit. I think in my mind, I think Mick was actually helping her a lot more than he let on to Jackie. In what respect? Well, I think he sort of fancied her a bit and he was helping, you know, like his wife's sitting there and it's all friendly. But I think Mick was probably the one that paid the deposit. because Jackie was saying, I don't know how she's going to get a deposit and all this and that. And then all of a sudden she's got a deposit with some shit story that she'd borrowed it or something. I think Mick was favoured a bit more than he let on, but it's neither here nor there. Right. Okay then. And then they were saying about Pat, how he'd got someone that he'd blamed for him and Sarah splitting up, who had helped Sarah leave. I don't know who the bloke was or how Pat had forced this bloke to sniff coke, and the bloke passed out, and then when he came round, made him sniff more coke, then held a knife to his throat, made him sniff more coke. Then apparently, what was it again? Oh yeah, they'd done about 50 fag burns on this bloke at the same time when he passed out. And when he passed out, they'd bring him back round by sticking fags all over his body, Apparently they stripped him naked, just totally humiliated this bloke, whoever he was. And did they mention a name? Didn't mention a name. The bloke apparently had to have 3 days in a psychiatric sort of unit. And what was the reason for them doing this? Well, Pat and his mates like Craig and that, because they blamed this bloke for him and Sarah splitting up. They said that this bloke helped Sarah leave Pat. And did they? And all he was the boyfriend of her best friend that had convinced her, fucking leave him. And this bloke had literally turned up, picked her and the kid up some clothes, and that was the reason it happened to him. Now, I mean, because they were, condemning him for it. Sorry, we slipped off track a bit here. Yeah, go on. But so, Sarah told Jackie and Mick that Pat was the people that Pat had borrowed money off, and he decided he was big enough and brave enough not to pay him back. He didn't need to pay him back because when they came for him for the money, he pointed them Mick's way and said the deal's fucked up, it's all gone wrong, I haven't got your money, Mick Steele's got it. And blatantly said, bump. And this, the way I heard it, that Mick Steele's got your money, I haven't got your fucking money. So I think there was a lot of verbal between people. I don't know who they were. All I know is that Pat was maintaining that he never received 1 pence, even though he received a wad of money. And I think the borrowed amount from these other hooligans was 40,000. And that was a borrowed amount that he had borrowed. Pat had borrowed and promised them whatever back. I don't know, the likes of his financial events. But he decided to knock them. He's a big, brave lad. He can do what he likes. And did you take it, sorry to interrupt you again, did you take it that it was these two brothers again? I took it that it was these blokes, but like I said to you, I only heard this afterwards. Right. Are you saying afterwards, after what? I only heard that he had borrowed the money off these brothers after Pat was dead. Right, okay, yeah. So I don't know. I think there were conversations to the effect that this is what Sarah told Mick that Pat had said, well, to these blokes he'd borrowed the money off of. Apparently it was a pair of brothers, that if he doesn't pay you, if he won't pay me, I'm going to kill him. We're back, to the same thing he said. I'll have him begging on his knees in front of you. He'll admit to it, he said. Then I'm going to fucking kill him right in front of you, to these blokes. So Sarah's rung up Mick and said, look, Pat's shouting his mouth off like you haven't paid him. He's going to do you. Here we go again. The conversation's mixed up. No, go on. So long story short, I don't see Mick very often because I'm at work. So I'm working in Heathrow. And I travel there every morning early and come home every night. So I'm coming home one night. I couldn't even tell you what night or what day he rings me up. And he says, here, I've got to see you. I've got to have a chat with you. I said, okay. He said, where are you? I said, I'm just going into the local pub, I said, because I'm on my way home from work, I start or leave for work at 4 a.m. It's a long drive, hard day's work, come home. I used to stop at this pub every night at the Cock at Rain. And he said, I'm just gonna go in the pub. He said, well, don't go in the pub. Come and have a drink with me. And I said, well, I've got the blokes from work with me. I said, I'll have a drink with them like I always do. Then I'll have a drink with you. He said, right then, meet me at Mark's Tate at the motorbike shop at Parkinson's. It's not it is Parkinson's. It's Ron Parkinson's. Ron Parkinson's. It is Ron Parkinson's. So I said, yeah, okay then. Because in the meantime, I'd actually bought an old motorbike off Fran's sister, prehistoric BSA thing. And I thought it wouldn't run because it needed a battery. So while I got up there fairly sharp, I was buying a battery before Mick turned up. So I got this battery, put it in my car or van. Well, I don't even remember what I was driving. And then he said, come with me. We've got a few things to sort out. And I said, what? Oh, I've got to sort everything out with Pat, he said, because it's gone far enough. We're going to have to talk about it, he said. So we're going to have another deal together. We've got a coke deal going down, he said. We're all going to earn plenty of money, blah, blah. And I said, what do you want me for? And he said, well, I was hoping what you could do is drop me off and he'd pick me up later. And I said, what, you're going on your own? Oh, no, 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 no. He said, no, no. He said, I'm parking my motor at the halfway house at Lanedham. He said, Jack will be there, Jack Womes. And he said, you drive us, he said. No, hang on a minute, let's get this right. He said, I'm staying at the halfway house to have a drink with Pat and to make friends. I said, right. What are we doing? He said, well, you'll take Jack to like where we're going to have the deal, he said, because we're having a deal. And I said, well, where's that? And he said, Jack will show you, don't worry. So Jack turns up, and Jack turns up in a car that I had sold to Mick, which was a Volkswagen Passat. I bought it off a bloke called Gary Stanley. Right nice car it was. Do you know the index of it, Darren? Well, I haven't got a clue. I mean, or what year it was? It was a B registration. B reg. Okay, yeah. I know that because I thought, cool, this is quite, I didn't pay a lot for it. It was quite a bargain, like sort of £250 car. So where did you see Jack? Well, anyway, when I'm talking to Mick in his Hilux, Jack has come along. That's at Mark's Tate. Yeah, but he hasn't stopped or got out or nothing. He said, right, we'll go now. Jack's with us. I said, what? He said, oh, he's behind us, like, in a car. And we're going along, and he said, what I'm going to do is, we're all going to drive to the halfway house. I said, yeah. He said, I'm going to stay there, and I'm going to meet him. We're going to have a deal, he said. Then we're going to come over to where you are, and then there'll be some other blokes there. We're going to sort the deal out, and then you drive us back. He said, I don't want to be at the deal in my car in case something goes wrong. He says, all you've got to do is drop us off and then drive away, he said, park up somewhere, and we'll ring you up to come back. We'll get in the car and we'll go. He says, is that all right? And I said, oh, I mean, we're driving down the fucking A12 now, aren't we? He's driven off. In Mickey's Hilux. Mickey's Hilux. He hasn't asked me. He's like, we're going along now. And I said, all right then, I suppose, you know. He said, oh, don't worry, I'll look after you. And I thought, blimey, if I had a fucking pound for every time he said that, I wouldn't have to work. And so we went to the halfway house. He said, wait here until they turn up. So we know they've turned up, so they've not let us down. And then Jack's in the car with me. In what car? In this Passat. Me and Jack's got in this Passat. Jack had drove it down. Jack said, it's full of petrol. I said, yeah. He said, then Jack says, right, here they are. They'd pulled up in a Range Rover, right? And did you see who was in the Range Rover? I didn't see nothing, just see a Range Rover. Jack said, here they are, right, off you go. So I pulled out the halfway house. I think I had to go up the slip road, down the other side, back down onto the A127. Do you know roughly what time this would be, Darren? 18:30 max. It was dark. About 18:30. About 18:30. It was dark though, because there was snow on the ground as well. It was not like snowed bad, but you know, it had snowed and it was a bit defrosted. Right. And then Jack says, pull over here. I said, why? He said, well, I want to change the number plates on the car. And I said, why? I said, what's the matter? He said, no, I've got to change them. And he had some with sticky back tape on, and they wouldn't stick because it was wet. And I said, well, they won't fucking stick, you silly sod. I said, they're wet. And he said, oh, we won't bother them. So we left these plates in the car. So he said, right, stop, drop me here. And like I stopped where he told me to stop and dropped him off. And he said, where was that? About, well, oh God, the old, you know, you get to the, is it a Rettendon Turnpike or something? It's a roundabout. Yeah. It's a roundabout with lots of roads off it, with traffic lights on it. Rettendon Turnpike? I think it's called the Rettendon Turnpike, yes? It is the Turnpike. And then we took the Chelmsford Road, the A130. The A130, that's right. We took that road and it wasn't far up there really, no more than sort of a mile down the bottom of the hill I dropped him, on the left-hand side of the road. And he got out of the car and he had a bag with him. I didn't, I just thought it was money, I don't know. So he said, right, what sort of bag would it be, Darren? I can't honestly remember because he was wearing overalls. I remember he was wearing overalls. I remember that. Do you remember what colour the overalls were? Blue. Dark colour. It's not in my mind. I just thought, he said, right, I've got your mobile number, he said. Was it like a small bag, you know, like an everyday bag, you know, like a toiletry bag or a rucksack? No. It was more of a, you get the carpenter's greenie bags, that sort of thing. It was quite a normal one, and I thought, you know, not the average bag. He had other things in his arms, like a coat and some other bits sort of thing, like a handful of bits, nothing particular, you know. I thought, well, it's cold, you know. Dropped him off, and he said, you be back here when we phone you. He said, you come back here, pull up, we'll jump in, and off we go. Who did he mean by we? Well, Mick was going to be coming to the deal with, like the others, in the Range Rover. Yeah. So, I said, yeah, all right, fine. How long will you be? He said, oh no, as soon as they turn up, will be 5 minutes, he said. The others will be waiting. Like, meaning there's some other people there already. So I said, okay then. So off I went, only sort of went down the road to a pub, turned round, drove back, and my phone didn't have any signal. And I thought, oh, fuck, he can't ring me. So I've drove back towards the Rettendon Turnpike, and then there's a few houses not far from where I dropped him. And then there's like a left turn that goes up a hill, like a little row of houses each side, like council houses. So I've gone up there, turned round, and come back down again, stopped, and my phone's got a signal. And I literally pulled up, and it rang. And he said, all right, Darren, come and pick us up. I said, that was quick, innit? Yeah, come and pick us up. So I've gone down there, and I've seen him, and I've turned into this, like, lane. He said, right, turn off your light, spin it round. So I'd done that, pulled back out, and he said, right, which way did he say to go? Just stop there, Darren. Who got into the car with you? Mick Steele and Jack Womes. Right. Well, first of all, Jack Womes got in the car. Is it a 2-door or 4-door car? 4-door Passat. Jack Womes got in the back of the car, and I said, where's Mick? Oh, he dropped something. I said, okay. Then Mick's got in the front of the car. I didn't really see what he was holding, but he said, right, go right, meaning the A130, towards Chelmsford, not back to the Rettendon Turnpike. When you come out this lane, turn right, see? So I'm driving down there, and then they went, phew, that's good. And then they just started chatting. They said, those fuckers are out of their hair now. Who said that? Mick, Jack, the pair of them, basically. They were both chatting away, and I said, and did Womes still have the bag with him? Yeah, he had a bag and all sorts, and they were taking bits off, and I said, all right, yeah, fucking sorted them right out. Mick had a bit of barrels of a sawn-off shotgun, side-by-side shotgun. He said, yeah, fucking shot it, and I'm glad all three of them turned up, got them out of my hair. And then I was like I feel now, actually, fucking hell, keep going. And we got to the traffic lights, and there's a swimming pool centre on the right. Yeah, I know. Went down that road, and then we went down that road for miles, like as if the road don't end. Sorry, which way have you turned? Right, we've come up to these traffic lights going back towards Chelmsford, and they said, go right here. So I've gone right there, drove straight down this road. I've gone down this road for a long, long, long way, like as far as it goes, I think. And then we've done another right. I wouldn't know where. Is that the end of the road? At the end of the road, I think. And then we've done another little right up a road, and there's a pub with a fucking great car park. Mick said, pull in the pub. There seemed to be a lot of activity. It must be near a station or something, I reckon, because loads of people seem to be using it as a bit of a car park, then wandering off, not going in the pub. He says, right, pull up here, he said. Right, Jack will take the Passat, you jump in with me. So I went, all right. Then on coming back, he said, are you all right, Darren? Everything okay? I said, well, fuck off, Well, what can you say? There's not exactly something you can give an answer to. Hang on, can I just stop you there? So you stopped on the pub car park and he told me to get out. Mickey's Hilux was there, was it? His Hilux was there, yeah. From what I gathered, what had happened was that he had made them follow him all the way to that pub. And the idea was it was to give us time to get to the other sites, like Jack could go and do what he had to do, not knowing how it was hiding in the bushes with a gun. Just to stop you there a moment, Darren. Do you know where Darren's speaking about, Chris? Yeah, I do, yeah. It's a public house on the junction of London Road, Rayleigh, and I'm not sure what the other road is. It's a side road, and you can go up the side road, and there's quite a huge pub. So from here, there's quite a complex discussion in terms of, I went down this road, took the second right, may have been a left. Well, was it down here? Was it down there? There's quite a lot of discussion, which I'm going to actually miss out in this particular video. It doesn't really add anything to the statement or this particular interview. So we'll cut that part out and move on to the next part of this police interview. Anyway, so he pulls in there and he says, right, get back in the Hilux. And Jack had a few seconds word, like a few words together. He got in and drove off and he said, Jack's going to leave the motor. And he took his overalls off, his Wellington boots. He was wearing overalls, I think. It was just overalls and Wellington boots. I don't know if they had gloves on. I think I noticed Jack had surgicals on. I think he had surgicals because I didn't get a good look in the car because I was only driving it. but I think Jack had got a bit of blood over him, like a fairish amount. You know what I mean? What are you talking on? Speckles, like specks of blood. Yeah. On him when they come back to... I sort of glanced, but I didn't really... He was wearing gloves, yeah. And it wasn't until we were about half a mile up the road that I've realised that they've, like I've said to you, they've shot him. When you were told by Mickey that you were going to go with him and Jack was going to, get rid of the car, yeah, the gun that you had seen, I hadn't actually seen a gun. I only see a bit. Well, the barrel protruding from the bag then. Yeah, I see a bit that apparently when he had fired it, the gun had fell apart and a bit had fell on the floor and they'd finished shooting them and they couldn't find this fucking bit. And Jack had phoned me and Mick was still with a torch hunting around trying to find this piece of gun. And he found it then because I said, "Where's Mick?" And he said, "Oh, he won't be a second." And he come wandering up, So at the time that you then left Womes in the Passat and went over to Mickey's car, what had happened to what you believed were the barrels of this gun then? Everything was in the Passat. Everything stayed in the Passat. Everything stayed in the Passat. And where did Mickey get changed? He literally stood next to his Hilux and it was snowy. He took his Wellingtons off and these overalls, I think. It didn't click, so I opened the doors and I just sat in and thought, fucking hell, I really thought that, that's when I lost it and thought, what's happened here? Fucking hell, I can't believe it. And what I think he did is he undid his overalls and pushed them down to below his wellies and stepped out of a wellie and put a shoe on, stepped out of another wellie and put a shoe on, and the whole lot got screwed up and went in the back. I'm not sure if he put it in the back of his own Hilux or in the back of the Passat, because I literally... And how far was the Passat from the Hilux, roughly? Parked, next to each other. He had just pulled in, but I was in the passenger seat and the Passat would have been the other side, if you know what I mean, like the driver's side. And I was sitting there it's difficult to think how I felt, but staring forwards really. But I know I remember seeing him because I was freezing cold. I really was cold. And I was thinking, phew. And he took them off. He took the overalls down, over the wellies and then sort of, pushing your jeans down over the top of your boots and then took them off and then slipped his shoes on. And then I don't know what he did with the overalls and wellies. Well, I didn't know then what he did with them. So tell me, you say you do know now what happened to them. You know what happened to them later. Is that what you're saying? What, at a later date? I remember him saying that Jack had something, he'd either melted the guns or ground them up to small pieces and thrown them in the fucking sea, basically. And the car had been gotten rid of, and all the clothing they were wearing had been burnt back at Mick's, because Mick still had the remains of this bonfire. It had gone out, but there was a big heap, and he says all the wellies and overalls have been burnt. He's telling me this at a later date. But then when we were coming back in the car, when we were coming back in the Hilux, he was telling me how cold-hearted Jack is. He said, I didn't really get a time to shoot them. He said, because Jack had some sort of pump action, it took quite a few cartridges. And he said, by the time I'd stepped out of the car, Jack had given me this little gun. Jack had already leant in the car and shot all three of them. And I said, oh. And he said, I saw one of them twitch. So I put both barrels to their head and fucking pulled the trigger. And I went, oh, right. And then he said, I think he said that Jack he had reloaded and shot Tate. Anyway, even though I think by the sounds of it, he was well and truly dead. And then he said, I think Jack reloaded and went round behind each of them and shot them in the back of the head as well. This is because this is Mick talking on the way back. And I'm just sitting there thinking, fucking hell, I don't ever want to upset these two. And he dropped me off back at my motor. And then on the way home, I just rung up my mate and I said, are you coming for a beer? And he said, oh, I'm staying in. I said, no, just come for a beer. I've got to go and have a beer. I said, just come out for a beer with me, please. And he said, all right then, all right. And he met me at the pub. So I just stopped in the pub, had a few drinks, drunk a few beers. And he said, are you all right? And I said, I'm just having a bad day. And he said, are you sure? I said, I'm having the worst day of my life. I said, everything's going wrong. And he said, well, what's wrong? And I didn't say anything, obviously. I was fucking double shocked about it. And the next day, Mick said, that's what happens. I think it was the next day. Well, I don't know how long it was after because I didn't even want to talk to the bloke. And the next time I spoke to him, he said, that's what happens to people that fuck me off. He said, that'll teach you and all his mates. And then they were laughing a while later. Who's they? Him and Jack. Because there's a bloke that when I was in prison, I couldn't get on with, the name of Ian Spindler. He was like, oh, I can't get on with the bloke. He talks about posh stuff, thinks he's far better than the rest of the world, and especially me. And like, he thought he was a really big man, weight trained with Pat Tate and all that. And then one day we were in the gym and we had a bit of a row. Basically, I hit him and like we split up. They sent him back to the unit. Then when I came back to the unit, we had a bit of a punch up. He lost. I mean, I beat him. And it was witnessed by a prison officer. And so they got rid of Spindler because Spindler was the blue-eyed boy because he was ex-Navy and half the officers are like Matlow and all this sort of thing. And they're all like Spindler's blue-eyed boy, like, you know, I don't know what rank he got, but apparently he got some sort of rank. But anyway, I didn't get on with him. And they were saying it's a shame, he said. When I was in the Range Rover, he said, they said, oh, if we'd waited 5 more minutes, Ian could have come with us, meaning Ian Spindler, you know? And he went, because Mick said to me, that would have been nice, wouldn't it, Darren? He said, you've never liked him. We would have fucking shot him for you and all that. And I said, well, I went, yeah, lovely. Then the subject was just dropped, end of, you know, end of really. It literally sounds mad. I literally forgot it had happened. And then the next day, I've gone home. I've got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, gone to work, done my day's work, come home, stopped in the pub. And like the topic of conversation in the pub, it had been announced on the radio about this shooting and everyone's talking about it. And I thought, fucking hell. So I just drank my beer and I said, oh, let's go home. I don't want to drink tonight. And that was it for like, then no contact with Mick. And then that like never finished the house. I've always had an excuse not to go round there. And then he sort of like starts ringing me up again to pop round and that. And he said he had a load of drugs a little while ago off someone called Russell from Southend. Someone called Russell. He was importing some drugs for someone called Russell. And same thing. You got a passport, Darren? I said, no, I haven't got a passport. He says, well, you should fucking get one. And I said, well, I don't want one. I can't be involved. He said, why not? He said, it's good money. I said, no offence, but after what happened in December, I don't want to be involved. I said, because I wouldn't want to fall out with you. Nah, it wouldn't happen to you. Nah, you're sweet. You're lovely, Darren. You're all right. No. I said, well, I haven't got a passport and I'm not getting one. I mean, you know, this is about, well, you can find out when it was actually. I'll tell you why, because he said, do me a favour, rent a car for me. I said, why? He said, well, I've got to go down and meet someone at Portsmouth or something, he said. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to leave this particular interview right here. There is a few more pages that start to discuss other deals that took place post the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. So what we'll do, we'll keep it as it is, just focused on the build-up to the murders themselves, and the very short time period afterwards. In the videos to come, over the next few days or so, I'm going to be dissecting specific parts of this interview and sharing some of my own thoughts. So do look out for those in the near future. As always, many thanks for joining me for this video. I look forward to seeing you all again for the next one. Take care. Cheers.